Okay, Miss Judy Santana, thank you for taking the time to be here today and for being brave enough to share about your grief and to talk about Miss Sarah Santana. So let's go ahead and let's go back to 89, I believe. This would be the time.
Yes.
Okay. And where are you at in life at this time? In 89.
1989, we were happily married with a little boy named Matthew, and I find out that I'm pregnant. So we're excited that I'm pregnant again. Mm-hmm. And but Sam, my husband, mm-hmm. tells me, "Oh, I just have a feeling that I am gonna have nothing but boys." And he goes, "So it's probably gonna be another boy." And back in those days, mm-hmm. you didn't have sonograms unless they felt there was a medical reason, nor did you have testing to find out the sex of the baby.
Okay.
So we had to wait.
So no gender reveals.
No gender reveals. Back in 1989. No gender reveals, so we just had to wait to 9 months to see what our baby was gonna be.
And could you feel what you were gonna have? Did you feel like you were gonna have a boy or girl?
What was strange about Sarah was with Matt, I always felt like he was a boy.
Okay.
And I remember buying all this boy clothes and my mom saying, "What if you don't have a boy?" And I said, "Mom, I just have this feeling he's a boy."
Okay.
When I was pregnant with Sarah, for some reason, I never got that feeling.
Okay.
I never got the feeling that the gender of the baby. What was kind of odd was that I wore a lot of black.
Okay.
When I was pregnant with Sarah, and when I was pregnant with Matt, I wore a lot of blue.
Okay.
And I don't think I did that purposely, but I kind of looked back at it and I said, "Why did I wear so much black?"
It's so odd sometimes how intuition is there, or instinct is there.
Yeah.
Spiritually, it takes, I guess, time, obviously. Fast forward to the situation where it's almost as if your soul's preparing.
Yes.
Your mind for what's going to happen. And so how was your pregnancy with Sarah? Was it a good pregnancy? Was it...
I remember when I was pregnant with Matt, I could
Mm-hmm.
eat just about everything. I gained 50 pounds.
Okay.
With Sarah, I was always nauseous. I didn't really get sick to my stomach, but I was just always nauseous. So I only gained 20 pounds with her.
Okay.
And I was just always nauseous. But I was really excited, and I remember just feeling her move for the
Mm-hmm.
first time, and I was cleaning all of Matt's baby things, his stroller. I remember cleaning the stroller and saying, "Can't wait," holding my stomach. And saying, "I can't wait to meet you."
So this was something exciting for y'all?
Yes.
Something to look forward to?
Yes.
You already have your son. So we're looking forward to your second baby. Do we have could you have a baby shower?
I did have a baby shower.
Okay.
I did have a baby shower, and what was ironic about that is that nobody showed up to my baby shower either.
Really?
Yeah, there were a few people from our church that showed up to the baby shower.
Did y'all have it at your church?
No. We had it at my mom. I think my mom kind of threw it last minute.
Okay. Do you remember how far along you were at this time?
Oh, I was probably 8 months.
8 months, okay. And were you getting like neutral clothes and
Yeah,
okay.
I was getting neutral clothes, and I remember this real pretty quilt that had yellow and pink and blue. It was my favorite gift of all the gifts that I received.
Yes. Okay. So we're excited for the baby, and so let's go ahead and move forward a little bit. When do things go south? When do things take a left when it came to your second baby?
Well, the last month of your pregnancy, you go in like every week to see the doctor. And so I was at that point going in to every week to get checked, but my doctor was always delivering a baby. So the nurse would check me. Back then, they just measured and listened for the heartbeat. And I remember the nurse saying, Judy, we're getting close. So if he's not here next week at your next appointment, she says, we're just going to have to reschedule you. And I said, okay. Well, that next week came and he was there, but I remember the doctor just like being in a real hurry. And he measured me, and then he said, he checked me, and I was already dilated to 1.
Okay.
And when he listened for the heartbeat, he quickly listened to the heartbeat, and he told me, sounds like you're going to have a boy. The heartbeat, because somebody told me back then that a little boy's heartbeat is slower than a girl's. But I remember feeling that the heartbeat didn't sound the same like it had been sounding. But he said,
so you could tell a difference.
I could tell the
Different
difference.
heartbeat.
And he said, I think I'll get to see you again next week, but if not, he goes, I'll meet you at the hospital.
Okay.
And my sister was supposed to fly in from California to be here for the birth. And I remember I was waiting to go pick her up from the airport, and this was the day after I'd seen the doctor.
Okay.
So I sat on the couch waiting for it to be time for me to go pick up my sister. And I sat on the love seat, and she moved in a weird way, and then I felt like she was kicking me like really, really hard. So I said, I guess the baby doesn't like the way I'm sitting, so I repositioned myself. But that was the last time I felt her move.
And were you already at 40 weeks?
I was at 39.
39 weeks, so you kind of had a week left to go. Okay. So how did you feel knowing that there was no more movement? Did you automatically know something was wrong?
I didn't automatically know something was wrong because I was getting like contractions.
Okay.
And when I would get contractions, I would kind of feel like I couldn't breathe. And so Thursday night, we were at my nephew's ball game, and I remember just feeling really tired, and then I started to think I really haven't felt the baby move.
Okay.
And I just remember going into the car and just sitting in the car at the baseball game and just thinking something just doesn't feel right. And the next morning was a Friday, and I told my husband Sam, who was getting ready for work, and I said, I think I'm gonna call the doctor because I just haven't felt the baby move at all. And he said, okay, just let me know. And he went off to work. So I waited till 8 o'clock, and I called the doctor's office, and and then they let me talk to the nurse. And I said, I haven't felt the baby move in a few days. And she said, well, sometimes they get a little lazy when they go into the birth canal. She said, but come on in so we can check for heartbeat. And I said, okay. So what was odd about that day is that Sam stopped by. He was running an errand for work, and he stopped by just to check on me. And I said, hey, I have an appointment like I think it was like at 10 o'clock. And he said, okay, let me take the hospital truck back, get my car, and then he goes, I'll come pick you up. I said, okay. So he went back to work, and then came pick me up, and we went to the doctor's office. And the doctor came in and tried to listen for a heartbeat, and there was none. And he tried and tried, and I remember him just moving around the whole stomach. And then he went really low, and you could hear something, and he said, that's your own heartbeat. And he said, I need you to get up and get dressed, and I'll meet you at the hospital.
So you had to, so where were you at when he was checking?
I was at the doctor's office.
The doctor's office, okay.
Yeah.
So y'all then had to drive to the hospital to meet him. So he didn't express anything more than... I remember him saying, I didn't hear the heartbeat like I wanted to. And I'm thinking in my head, you didn't hear a heartbeat at all. And I got up from that examining table and went into the little dressing. It was a little dressing area that just had a curtain. And I pulled that curtain and I grabbed my stomach. And I said, God, please let my baby be alive. And then this peace came over me. And I heard God say to me, your baby's not alive, but it's going to be okay. Wow.
And so I put my clothes on and headed to the hospital.
So the Spirit of the Lord was already preparing you.
Yes.
And even comforting you.
Yes.
In a way that maybe your doctor should have.
Yes.
From the get-go. And that's extremely beautiful, and thank you for sharing that, because that just teaches us, no matter where we're at, no matter how low in the pit we are, God is so sovereign in even guiding us in those dark times. If we just take the time to listen or cry out or call out to Him. So from here, y'all go to the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And are you okay with sharing what happens from there?
Yes. We get to the hospital and they call in. First, they called in the sonogram tech, and I remember we waited and waited and waited and waited, and they were paging. It was a doctor. They were calling, and they paged her, and she was not coming. So when she finally came in, and she started the sonogram, and I wouldn't look at the screen because I didn't want to look at the screen. And she didn't say a word to me. She just walked off. And a nurse was coming in the door, and I just see her shake her head no.
So was she confirming?
Yeah, she was just
that.
confirming, and then the doctor came in shortly after, and he said, I'm sorry. But the baby's not alive.
And at this moment, do y'all now know if it's a boy or a girl?
We still don't know.
Still don't know. So what actions does the doctor need to take now?
So the doctor says we need to induce labor. And I remember my husband saying, well, can she have a C-section? So that we could just get it over with.
Right.
And the doctor says no. we don't need to do a C-section because she'll have a permanent scar to remember this happening. And he said, we just need to induce labor. And I remember saying to him, well, can I have an epidural? Because if I'm going to have to deliver a baby that's not like, I don't want to be in so much pain. And he said, sure. And so we wait a little bit, and the doctor comes in, the anesthesiologist comes in to give me the epidural. And the epidural doesn't quite work well. Like, it only numbed one side. It only numbed to my right side, and it didn't numb my left side. And so was in labor. Labor started, and then it got later into the evening, and I'm waiting, and obviously, like, families already heard the news, so they're coming in and out of my room. And I have a sheet over me, and I feel something kind of slip out. And the nurse, I tell the nurse, I said, I felt something slip out. So she picks up the sheet, and then she puts the sheet back down. But I could see the look on her face that something was not right. And she runs out of the door, and she starts calling my doctor, and he comes in, and then he comes in and he looks at me, and then he starts doing something, and I said, Dr. Young, what's the matter? And he said, the baby's hand has slipped out. And he tries for about 10 minutes to get the baby repositioned, and it was very, very painful. Because he would push her back up, and he tried for 10 minutes, and then I remember him just taking his glove off in frustration and just slamming it and saying, I can't. We're going to have to do a C-section. So I was basically in labor all day just to have a C-section, and I think they took me in about 10 o'clock that evening to have a C-section. So I still didn't know what the baby was. And they prep me for surgery, and they start cutting on the left side. Well,
where you are.
Where I'm not really numb. So every time they start, I could feel it. So I would say, and I can feel that. So they would give me a little bit more medication, and then I kept saying, I can feel it. So obviously something went wrong when they gave me the epidural. And I remember Sam was sitting down next to me on the left side. And by this time, it's way after 10 o'clock. I've been in labor all day, so I'm exhausted. And I had this fear of having surgery.
Okay. I
had this fear of having surgery, but I guess just like the fear that I wasn't going to wake up. Mm-hmm. And I remember the doctors looking at me and looking at Sam. And then I look at Sam, and Sam looks at me, and he says, babe, do you want to be put to sleep? And I said, yes, I'm tired. So he put me to sleep. And the next thing I know is the nurse is waking me up, but she has Sarah wrapped up. And she says, Judy, wake up, Judy, wake up. And she says, you had your baby, but she's dead. And I remember thinking, I think you could have been a little bit more gentle. on the way you woke me up from this situation. And she said, and I said, what was it? And she said, it's a baby girl. And even though I was heartbroken, in my mind I was kind of like, wow, Sam said we would never have a little girl. And so they let Sam come into the room, and I remember Sam coming up to the bed, and then I go, it's a girl. And he stepped back. And then I look at him and I said, it's a girl. And he stepped back again, and I could see the heartbreak. And he said, he grabbed my hand and goes, babe, the baby is not alive. And I said, I know she's not alive, but you told me we would never have a girl. And he was really concerned because he thought I thought the baby was still alive, but I knew she wasn't. And I was just trying to say, hey, you were wrong. We had a little girl.
So, having to endure going through a physical pain, going through a heartache, where did your mind go anywhere in this moment?
It was a lot for me to absorb at that time. And, things are, I just thank God that things have changed so much from that time to this time. And I was like, we need to, I didn't even think about funeral arrangements, but everybody started talking about funeral arrangements. Our pastor was there the whole time.
Okay.
And he was like, we're going to take care of everything. But being that I was in labor all day, being that the doctor was trying to adjust the baby into a position where I could birth her, and then a C-section, I lost so much blood that they told me that I'd have to have a blood transfusions. And that was another thing that I had a fear of, was blood transfusions, because back in the day there was AIDS and things that people talked about, blood transfusions. So I was afraid of that. But so I'm in recovery, and I remember how horrible it was. The nurse would come in and smash down on my stomach. They said they had to do it, and I would just cling on to the bed rails and just scream because it hurt so badly. And the funeral arrangements were being made. And I remember the church chaplain coming in, and everybody knew my husband because he worked at the hospital. So they were all very nice and loving to us, but I remember being angry. Then the anger set in, because you're like, God, why would you let me carry this baby 9 months just to take her back? And so the anger started setting in, and the chaplain comes in and he's giving me his condolences, and then he says, I need you to pray. He goes, I know this is a hard time for you, but I need you to pray. And I was like, I really don't feel like praying right now. He says, I need you to pray. And I remember little parts of my prayer, but I couldn't really even, this time I couldn't even really talk, because it was just grief coming out. And I said, but I remember telling God, I know you have your reasons for this. And that's probably the most I remember of that prayer. But I was angry because I was like, don't make me pray. to a God that just
Right.
let me go through this.
Right.
And so anyway, the funeral happened, and I was no part of the funeral.
Due to recovery.
Due to recovering, and I was having blood transfusions, and back then, you know, they kept you in the hospital a little bit longer when you had a C-section, and but I was not part of her funeral.
And when did this occur? What date was this that you went through the surgery, finding out your daughter's, you know, now gone? And
So it was April 27th of 1990.
okay, and the funeral was right the very next day? Was it a couple days?
It was the following week,
Okay,
and because this was a Friday when all of this happened.
okay.
So we went through the weekend, and I can't really remember the day, but it was early in the following week that it happened.
And during this time too, why did y'all come up, or why did y'all name her Sarah? When did her name come into?
I always liked the name Sarah, and I wanted her middle name to be Felice because Sam's dad was named Felice and his mom was named Felicita. So I wanted her name to be Sarah Felice Santana. And once again, like, if you go back to 1990,
Mm-hmm.
if things went wrong, we're gonna go wrong, they went wrong with us. Including Sam, like, giving the information for her death certificate and did not give her the middle name. And
So completely dropped the ball on.
yeah, so I think my dad and Sam went to the funeral home,
Okay.
and men just don't
Right.
think,
Detail.
think about details like that. So I was upset about that they didn't give her middle name.
Okay.
And the other thing that also happened is that I remember feeling that night, Friday night, they were saying, do you want to hold the baby? And I said, no, I don't want to hold the baby. And they said, you really need to hold her. And I said, okay. So they brought her in, and I guess she had already been gone like 3 days, so her skin was peeling off. And I just remember holding her, and then I started to choke because of my emotions, and they said it was because of the tube that they had to put down my throat during the surgery. And so I started choking, so they took the baby away and they never brought her back. And looking like now, it's like it's important that you spend enough time as you need to say goodbye.
So, do you now feel grateful that they brought her in and said,
Yes.
you need to have your
I am
moment?
so grateful that I did get to hold her. It was very brief, but I got to hold her.
And can you give us her features? Can you let us know hair color, a lot of hair, not a lot of hair?
Oh, she had a lot of hair. She had a lot of hair. She had very chubby cheeks. She was all Santana. And like I said, it was such a brief moment that I would have liked to have looked at her fingers and her toes. But they did cut a little piece of her hair. And I do have that.
Do you have a lock of her hair?
I have a lock of her hair.
Was it dark, light?
It was dark.
She had dark
it was
hair.
dark. It was nearly black.
Nearly black. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. For those who aren't aware, you are my mother-in-law, and I always think about my sister-in-law, Sarah, and I always think about what would she have looked like. She's a year younger than me, so we would have been very close in age, and I always think about her when we get together, or her birthday comes around, or I just always think, what would life have been like with Sarah? And do you have an insight as to maybe how her character, what kind of character she might have had? Did you feel any kind of, when you did get to hold her, or even when you were pregnant, could you feel maybe what kind of character?
I feel like she was going to be a very calm-natured child, and it's just very sweet, and yeah, and I she would have turned 34 this year, and it's 34 years later, and I think about her every day, and I think the same, like, what would she have been like, and I actually still think about how I would love to for Matt and Emily to have grown up with her, because God, I remember a sermon that I heard when I was an early teenager, and about these families in the church that were all pregnant, and they all prayed for their sex of the baby, and all of them got opposite of what they prayed for, except for one couple. So the pastor asked them, what was different about your prayers for the baby? And they said, we started praying before we conceived. And so that sermon always resonated with me. And so after I lost Sarah, I remember once my anger went away, and was able to pray again, my prayer was always, Lord, you gave me my baby girl, but you took her back home. Please let me know what it's like to have a little girl someday. And it was 3 years later that I had my daughter Emily. And I cherish my relationship with my sisters. And I always wish that my daughter Emily could have had the opportunity to grow up with her sister. And Matt too.
Yeah, that would have been a beautiful sight, and I know that we all can't wait to meet her, be with her in the glory of the Lord one day. But I do want to touch base on that anger and that grief, because I know when people go through this, and a lot of women, a lot of fathers, fathers and mothers will deal with, so they consider this a stillbirth, correct?
Yes, stillbirth.
They go through this same testimony as you, and I feel like they have no guidance. Where do I go from here? Is it okay to feel the way I do? And it still happens till this day. And so I want to touch base on your grief and your anger. How many years or even months did you suffer from that? Not that grief goes away, but how long did you stay in that just sorrow?
The grief never goes away, is correct. You think about a piece of your heart is missing. And I remember it was a good 3 years, and I cried every day. I cried myself to sleep. Life was going on around me, and people were having babies, and people were having little girls.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I was like, why couldn't I have my little girl? And you know, the sad thing is that other people do kind of like avoid the subject about talking about your baby and what you've been through. So I was like, come on, people, like that was my baby.
Right.
And I lost a child, you know. Don't just act like
that it just happened.
Yeah, that it just happened. And I remember the doctor telling me, don't blame yourself. This is something that happens. And I'm like, that doesn't heal my heart. You know, that doesn't heal my heart. And I had this beautiful little boy that kept me going. And I thank God that I had Matt, you know, to keep me going.
Give you that drive.
Was it easy? It wasn't easy, but I knew I had a little boy that needed his mom to feed him, to hold him, to bathe him. And he kept me going, you know. But there was that deep grief, like, it's just indescribable. And you're just always missing that part of your family, that piece of your heart, and that's missing, you know. And you know, I'm like, yeah, everybody says, you know, you can, all the famous saying for everybody is, you can have another one, you can have another one, you can have another one. And I remember one of my uncles coming to the hospital, and he said, he was trying to be sympathetic, but he didn't really have the words. He goes, don't let this happen again. And I said, I hope this doesn't happen again. You know, but so, you know, then when I was finally pregnant again, there was a lot of fear.
So Judy, in the time of grieving, anger, confusion, you name it, you're going through it, was this affecting any kind of relationships, marriage, family, friends? Did this have a heavy weight on your personal and inner circle?
I think it did, because like grief, like I've learned, you have so many different emotions. You can be mad at one moment, your memories will make you smile, then you can be angry. And I think like grief, the anger is like one of the main serious emotions you go through. And so a lot of my issue was, you know, like my friends were all going on with life, and I was just in my grief and my pain, and I didn't want to like really hang out with anybody. I didn't want to, you know, do anything. I didn't want to go to family functions because there were babies, you know. And I remember this one time we were at my brother Manuel's house, and my cousin came over with his little baby girl. And I tried to be strong, and I remember just bursting out of the room and going into his bedroom, and my sister Vicky followed me, and I was just bawling. And she turned around, she said, I know what's going on with you. And she said, it's that big girl, huh? I said, yes. So yeah, you have all these emotions and you push away. I think that I needed Sam more at that time than ever before. And unfortunately, Sam is a kind of person that he doesn't like to talk about sad things, and so I couldn't really talk to him about my grief, and I didn't really have anybody to talk to.
I was going to ask, did you have anybody that...
I didn't have anybody to talk to about my grief. And so I kind of felt alone. I felt alone because I didn't have anybody to talk to about my grief. And yet, I mean, I think still back in the 90s, early 90s, it was, I think people were afraid to talk about it. And, you know, they just... It was, I just kind of feel like it's something that just would get swept under the rug.
Right.
Because, you know, first of all, I know people don't know what to say.
Right.
And there's never the right words to say to somebody who's grieving. But if you can just say, I love you and I'm praying for you. I think just hearing those words from your friends, family, is so much better than them trying to say things like, you can have another one. Because they don't, you know, and I know they don't mean to hurt you, but it hurts because they're basically telling you you can replace the baby that you lost, and there's never replacing that baby that you lost.
Right.
You know?
It's so funny to me when people say that, because you would never go up to a widow and say, well, you can get remarried. You can always find a new man, or vice versa. You don't go up to a husband that just lost his wife and say, well, you can find you another one. And so I can't believe sometimes how ignorant that can be to say, oh, well, you're young, you can have more. Or, because like you said, they don't mean to be malicious, but it's just better not to say anything at all. So when did things start getting lighter for you? When do things start to kind of get a little better? When do you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
I think that when we found out we were pregnant with Emily, I remember my niece coming to visit, and she had her little baby, Christopher, and Sam and I fell in love with Christopher, and we just enjoyed our time with Christopher. And I would think, is it time for another baby? Should we try again? But then there's that fear. I don't want to go through it again. And it was kind of strange because Christopher kind of was here for most of the summer of 1992. And after Christopher left, I was like, I had some symptoms of, you know, that I might be pregnant. But I took a pregnancy test and it was negative. And then I took another pregnancy test and it was negative. And I went in to my doctor's office and they did a blood test and they told me that it was negative. And so I was like, you know, like I had these mixed emotions because I was like, am I pregnant? And I would get excited, and then I'm like, well, maybe I'm glad I'm not, because I just can't. I can't deal with something like that again. And then finally I went to, I think I waited another 2 weeks and I took another pregnancy test and it was finally positive. And then I went and got blood work and it was positive. And by this time I had a brand new doctor, and he was the most wonderful doctor. And I remember the first time I went in there and he said, you know what? He goes, I don't think you gotten over losing your baby. I remember him, he was a fairly new doctor, Dr. Deshawn, and he opened up his desk drawer and gave me all this stuff to read. beautiful poems and things like that that was very healing. And so I was so glad that I started to see a new doctor. And I knew he was a Christian man. I could just feel it. And he, I remember he was so excited when from my first visit, my prenatal visit. And I remember him saying, well, he started to listen for the heartbeat, and there was no heartbeat. And he moved everything around, and I remember thinking, oh, here we go again. But this was early on.
Okay.
And so he said, I'd like to take you into the sonogram room. So he took me into the sonogram room, and I remember just those emotions all flooding back, like, here, I'm going to go through this again, but I'm just glad it's at the beginning this time. And but yet my heart was like, just aching. And he took me to the sonogram room, and he found the heartbeat. And I remember him just going, and I was like, thank God. Well, anyway, he monitored me through the whole pregnancy. Like, he would put me on the fetal monitor just to make sure her heartbeat was there. And we did find out. By this time, you could find out what...
We're in a new era.
We're in a new era, so you could find out the sex of your baby. So we found out she was a girl. And we were just thrilled that we were going to have our little girl, but still was always like, man, like, yeah, I wish, their sister was here.
Very bittersweet.
Yeah, bittersweet. And so, I think, once again, your heart still aches, a piece of your heart's still missing, but, we were excited because God, and number one, when I found out I was a little girl, I was like, thank you, God, because you did hear my prayers. And you granted me that little girl that I asked for.
And so now you're a mother of 3 kids. You have Matthew, Sarah, Emily, and your 2 children gives you that drive now more than ever. And so do things get better for you from that point on?
I'm not sure. Mentally, yes, because you keep busy. When you have children, there's always something going on. You have to care for your children. Then they start school, and so things got better. I mean, but you never forget, and you always, hold Sarah in your heart, and you're always thinking, what if? What would she be like? What would she be doing right now? Would she be close to my other kids? You're just always thinking that. And I did have the privilege of having a great nephew that was born 3 weeks after I lost Sarah. So I love all my nephews and nieces, but this particular great nephew, has a special place in my heart because through him and his milestones, I could kind of this is what my daughter would be, going through. And I'm just grateful for that too. At that time he was born, I was excited, but still, I remember feeling jealous because I was like, you know, everybody's celebrating that baby and they forgot my baby.
Completely understandable. And I just want to thank you for coming on here and sharing Sarah with us, because I personally don't want her ever forgotten or just let's sweep it under the rug, move forward. We will always remember her. We will always think about her. And if you can just share if you have any advice for mothers, fathers that have experienced this, are experiencing this, or will experience, if you could just leave us with words of wisdom that you've learned to.
Yeah. First of all, I'm very grateful for this project because, like I said, in my experience, it was just, there was no one there for me. And what I want moms and dads to know is that you're not alone, that other people have gone through the same thing. You'll never, every situation is unique, but you're not alone. And number one, I thank God that He gave me the strength to keep going. And I want people to know that, if anything, I will be there to support you. And there are other people out there to support your grief, your pain. You're not alone. And your babies will always be remembered.